Hello, my friends. My name is Ed DeCosta, and I'm an executive coach, among other hats that I wear. I'd like to give you a lesson today about effectiveness, your effectiveness in business and in your personal life. We're going to use the framework of problem solving to teach the lesson. You've heard the old story of the tortoise and the hare. Slow and steady wins the race. Now, what is the point of that story? Is it just going slow and keeping at it? In the long run beats the person who doesn't persevere but starts out with great fanfare? Of course, that's one of the lessons. It's also about taking your time at the beginning to understand truly what the objective is and, in fact, what the problem is. You can't, for example, be an effective problem solver if you don't understand what the problem is. And so many times people rush to judgment, think they understand what the problem is, and then are shocked when the things that they propose or actually do in terms of solutions don't address the circumstances because they never really understood the problem in the first place. I'm going to give you a couple examples. One to just illustrate the principle, and then another one as it pertains to a real business problem that's fairly common. So imagine you're driving down the road and you come upon a giant hole. Now you see it in advance, so you stop the car. And I'll show, when I'm giving this point in a talk, I'll show a picture of a giant hole in the road. And I'll say, what's the problem? Invariably, someone will say, what? There's a hole in the road. Of course, that's a problem. But it's not the problem. It's a symptom of the problem. And I'll put it to the audience. I put it to you. If the hole in the road's not the problem, what is the problem? Think about it. Most likely, someone will say the next typical thing is, you can't get by the hole. People can't get by. Cars and trucks can't pass. People are going to be late for wherever they're going, home, work, or elsewhere. And that's not the problem either. That is a consequence of the problem. Now, in a short video, I'll just kind of cut to the chase. The problem is erosion. Typically, when there's a sinkhole, when there's a hole in a road, it comes from the fact that water and gravity combine to take out the underneath of a road, and therefore there's a collapse. I'm oversimplifying just to illustrate the point. But the main message here is that the hole is simply a symptom, and the fact that you can't go around is a consequence. And if you, for example, focus only on the symptom, you'll just fill the hole with dirt and pave over it and have you address the problem. No, unless civil engineers and highway folks do the right things in order to address the potential for future erosion, it's just a matter of time before that hole reappears. And if you address the consequence, the fact that people can't get by, well, you simply detour people and tell them to go another way. Of course, that doesn't address the problem either. So once again, taking the time to truly understand a problem is the very first step to solving a problem. So a very common one, and I dealt with it not too long ago with one of my coaching clients, an executive, senior executive, is high employee turnover. High employee turnover. They lost 12% of their employees the year prior, and then 8%, a further 8% of their employee base left voluntarily in the first half of the following year. So a significant employee turnover. Of course, my question is, what's the problem? It's like, what do you mean, what's the problem? I just told you what the problem is. The problem is we got high employee turnover. I've lost all of these people. I said, well, no, I don't think that's the problem. I think that's a symptom of the problem. What's the problem? He thought about it. And of course, he said, I've got to go higher. I'm going to great expense in my human resources function to recruit. I'm paying exorbitant fees for some senior level people to get headhunters to locate me people. I'm spending an arm and a leg on recruitment and employee retention. So those costs are huge and I can't bear them in the long run. That's the problem. But actually, that's not the problem either. That's a consequence of the problem. Now, mind you, I'm not making simply a semantic argument that say, oh, technically that's not the problem. Of course, these things are problematic, but if you don't get underneath the surface to understand what is causing these things to happen, you are not going to be able to solve them. Sure enough, in this particular case, they had recently done, in fact, the last 4 years, they had employee surveys, and I looked through the data, spoke to their HR folks. Sure enough, they had an enormous issue with poor leadership. They had an enormous issue with micromanagement. Think about the difference between leadership and management. It's night and day. There's no comparison. People do not want to be managed. Systems and procedures should be managed. People should be led. Once again, it's not a semantic argument. It's the difference between night and day. It's not just the feedback from the employees that had left. It's employees that were still remaining or complaining loudly by the only mechanism that they thought they had was that there was a lack of employee engagement and empowerment and a culture that treated employees with respect. That was the underlying problem that manifested itself in the symptoms of people who could leave, found a time and a place to leave, and then, of course, the consequence is the recruitment and employee retention expenses. Now, once you've focused on what the problem is, you can begin to address it at the root cause. It's not just putting a Band-Aid over the problem, it's actually addressing the real issue. So, again, in business and in your life, with your children, with your significant others, any real problem that you believe you're having, take a second look, take a third look even, to make sure that you are addressing the real problem before spending the time to solve the so-called problem. Again, my name is DeCosta, and I hope you found this helpful. Take care, my friends.